So every time that I do a diamond stone or sharpening stone review video, we talk about grit contamination. And I always get asked about what grit contamination is and why it matters. So here's a direct, quick video explaining what grit contamination is and why it matters. Grit contamination is when large particles contaminate the surface of a finer grit stone. So here's an example of grit contamination on the Spyderco CBN stone, which I don't think that they make any longer and probably shouldn't. It was super overpriced and had major grit contamination problems in multiple samples. So this is just the corner of the fine side of the Spyderco CBN stone, and it is just riddled with super large particles. This is not good. So here's a 1200 grit ultra sharp stone with some grit contamination. Basically what happened with these stones is that there was some clumping of diamond on the surface, making these raised spots on the stone. These are also not super cheap stones either. These ultra sharp stones were some of the worst value stones that I've tested. They all had grit contamination in the form of clumping of the diamond on the surface. For the price of these, for the size that they are, I would definitely expect better. So here is a super cheap $10 fine diamond stone with all kinds of different sized particles on the surface. Major grit contamination on some of these ultra cheap stones. The super cheap $10 stones you see on Amazon may seem like a good value, and some of them actually are, but others not only have very bad grit contamination, but also plating quality issues that don't encapsulate the diamond correctly, and after just a few uses, all of the diamonds fall off. Another thing that's not really good. Now the problem and why this matters is that if you're paying for a fine diamond stone, you would expect to get a fine diamond stone. You don't want these super coarse particles on the surface since it basically makes the stone perform more like a coarser option. So if you are paying for a coarse stone and a fine stone, and the fine stone has contamination, you're basically getting a coarse stone and a coarse stone, not a coarse stone and a fine stone. You're not really getting what you paid for. So here's a cheap 1200 grit stone with some contamination in the scratch pattern. On the surface, it doesn't look too bad. However, one area where you will notice is right along the corner of the secondary bevel. This is where that contamination will make its presence known, and this is something that you can actually see in real life. Now, there's really no such thing as contamination on coarse stones. You want coarse particles on a coarse stone, and any finer particles that technically contaminate it won't do anything anyway. So contamination really only matters on the finer grits. Now, contamination can also happen in other types of stones as well. It's just way less noticeable. Otherwise, it's basically that simple. Stones with grit contamination will sharpen your knife, but we look at this as just one metric to assess the quality of diamond stones in particular. I will leave links to some of the stones and companies that I've tested that I have never had contamination issues with, just to help guide you in the correct direction. I hope this helps. We'll see you in the next video.